What happened to all of the Roadkill project cars? You've got questions, I've got answers. This is going to be the video that reveals what happened to every single Roadkill project car. 13 years, I think 167 episodes, and I think right around 150 cars. That is the life of the Roadkill TV show. From the very beginning, we built all sorts of different vehicles, and after the show was canceled, I have been deluged with questions from the audience about what happened to all of those cars. And in this video, I'm going to answer the question for every single one of them. At least I think so. I've gone through in depth, looked at every episode, and yeah, there's maybe some cars in the background or things like that that are going to get left out. But I am going to show you all of the hero cars and explain where they went. Now, this is also going to be really cool because for those of you who missed Roadkill ever since it got taken off YouTube, you're going to get to see a snapshot of all of the craziness that happened for the full 13-year run of the show. You're really going to get an idea of all the cars that we worked with. And I guess it's a good documentation of what happened with all of them, because I know that people are wanting to know which host got what. Well, most of that information is going to be here. There's a couple secrets I still have to share, but I can still reveal most of what happened to 140-ish, 150-ish cars. Remember, even though Roadkill is over, they're going to rerun it forever on the Motor Trend cable TV channel, and also they still stream them. If you're a subscriber to either Max or Discovery Plus, you can go find the whole library of Roadkill back episodes. So if there's some of these cars that intrigue you that you never saw before because you didn't see them on YouTube, there is an opportunity to go check them out. You'll find that there are some of these cars where I don't know precisely where they are today. So if you know, go ahead and put it in the comments. Let's dig up where all of these things live and see if we can avoid losing track of them. So post in the comments, post on my social media. If you know where some of these cars are, let's have it. All right, now let's get into it. And because there's so many of them, I have a list because I can't keep it all in my head. Let's go! The very first episode had that 73 Pontiac Catalina that Finnegan and I bought for dirt cheap out of El Paso, Texas, and we hobbled the thing home. After that, we had a promotion, I think, with eBay where we sold the car. It went back to Ohio. The people who owned it ended up taking it on a hot rod power tour. They later sold it. I don't know what happened to it. Next, the Ranchero. I can't remember if the Ranchero, it must have been a 68. Yeah, it wasn't a 69, it was a 68 Ranchero. That's the one where we cloned it to look like the car that had appeared in the Baja 1000 in its very first year and that won its class as driven by Ray Brock and Ack Miller from Hot Rod Magazine. And of course, it's the car where we tried to get it to Alaska, and then we did get it to Alaska. It was in a bunch of other episodes. Here's the thing about that car. It's the one Roadkill car that you can go see pretty much anytime you want. It is at the Car Museum in Deer Lodge, Montana. When the show was coming to an end, I kind of had a sense that it was going to happen, and so we road tripped it there and donated it to the museum. The Ronco, the full-size Ford Bronco that we had in the Cheap Truck Challenge. That thing got bought for cheap and then sold for dirt cheap right after the episode, so it's gone. Finnegan's wife's El Camino, that's the one where we drove it up to Summit Racing and did the engine swap in the parking lot, and it showed up in a bunch of episodes of Hot Rod Garage after that. Well, Finnegan ultimately LS swapped it, put a trick suspension on it, Willwood brakes, and got it all painted and everything, and it's still living with him at home. I think that's a forever family keeper. The Van and the Wagon. So this was the first episode where we just destroyed cars for no reason, which is a thing I never really loved. It happened a few times. It was a really nice Buick wagon, but something was wrong with it where it couldn't be titled, and then we had that Dodge van. Well, both of those things got sent to scrap right after we did the episode. Actually, I take that back. I think the Buick sat around forever with watermelons in the back and got really stanky and disgusting, and then we sent it to the junkyard. The Rat Rod versus the Lamborghini. That is the Roadkill episode that put us on the map because it's the one that YouTube pushed like crazy. Millions upon millions of views on that deal. We didn't own either one of those cars. The Lamborghini went back to the rental car company where we got it, and Sailor Jerry Rum Company owned the Rat Rod, and we handed that back too. I don't know where they are today. The Jaguar, you've seen it in so many episodes. It's the Jaguar XJ12 loaded with a 383 Chevy and an 871 Supercharger. And this is the first time that I will reveal that I bought that car from the company. So you will be seeing it on the David Freibuger channel. Macho Grande, my 1973 GMC Suburban Sierra Grande. I loved that thing, but I did sell it, and it now lives in Finland. Blasphemy. It's hard to believe that Mike Finnegan's 1955 Chevy with the 426-based Chrysler Hemi goes all the way back to season 1. And of course, Finnegan still has that car and is competing in drag and drive competitions, which you can see on Finnegan's Garage on Finnegan's YouTube channel. Gups Holden. We flew down to Australia and did burnouts in Gup's car that had, I think, a 727 cubic inch Sunny's Hemi in it. I believe Gup still has that car. The Junkyard Cuda. This is one of the cars and episodes that really put Roadkill on the map. It's the earliest episode that you saw that was Roadkill instead of pre-Roadkill, where Finnegan and I went to a junkyard, got a vehicle running, and drove it away. And it was at CTC Auto Ranch in Denton, Texas. And when we were done with that car, it got sold to the School of Automotive Machinists, and I think they ultimately sold it back to CTC Auto Ranch, and they sold it just a few years ago. It sat there for a long time, and unfortunately, CTC Auto Ranch is now going out of business, and they are crushing what's left of the cars. Here's another episode that kicked off with needless destruction, the cop car showdown, the Chevy 9C1 Caprice versus the Crown Vic Police Interceptor. I believe we bought both of those cars from the same guy who was a cop car dealer. He would buy them from auction and sell them, and once we were done with them, they went right back to that guy. And now the worst vehicle we ever had on the show, or at least the one that I thought was going to cause my death more than any that I can recall at this moment, the flat rod Jeep, that flat fender that was all slammed, tires hanging out. I can't believe Finnegan and I drove that thing on the freeway because it was more like sitting on it than in it. And ultimately we did break the front suspension, off-roading it in a way that would have killed us had it happened on the highway. At the end of that episode, we gave the Jeep to the person who covered our bar tab, I believe is how it worked. And then we saw it for sale around Southern California for quite a long time after that for like exorbitant prices. And I honestly don't know where it is today. The Leaf Blower Monza. I actually dug our 1975 Chevy Monza factory V8 car with a 4-speed. It's the one where we went to Jeff Lutz's shop and boosted or supercharged the engine with a bunch of leaf blowers and took it land speed racing. It appeared in another episode after that where we had the boost caboose. I built a trailer on the back, or we did, me and Mike, and had an engine mounted to it with a, I believe, must have been Paxton supercharger on it, maybe it was a Vortec, and boosted the engine with the engine running the supercharger that was on the trailer. You get what I'm talking about. Anyway, that car is still in the possession of Jeff Lutz. He's got it, I think, in a barn or in a truck behind his shop, and he and I and Finnegan have talked forever about going and doing something with it. Perhaps you will see that eventually on YouTube. The Gremmy. I bought this little gremlin when I was doing Car Junkie TV circa 2008 and 9, so it's been in my fleet for really the entirety of my television and YouTubing career. That's, of course, the gremlin that ended up in a lot of episodes, including the one where we crushed the Prius with a tank. And now it is the Hemi Gremmy, which I will get to later on in this episode. Oh, the Prius? Yeah, we drove over that with a tank. Behind the scenes info here, we actually took all the batteries out of that thing before we did it, because even then we knew that those EV batteries or hybrid batteries could cause a potential fire that we would never be able to put out. So we scrapped those or recycled them or did something like environmentally appropriate with them, and then squashed the car with the tank and sent the Prius to the junkyard. The OG muscle truck. That one has been in my fleet since before Roadkill, and now it's in the fleet afterwards. Yep, I still have the muscle truck. You'll eventually see it on my channel. And of course, my Super Bee. This is my very first car. I bought it when I was 15 in 1983, and I've still got it, although I must admit, I have not had it running since the last time it was seen in a Roadkill episode. And the Crusher Camaro, a legendary project car that goes back to 1994 in the pages of Hot Rod magazine. The story on that one is completely told in a video that you can find here on my channel. It's the history of the Crusher Camaro, where I show all the different iterations of that car, some of which were seen on Roadkill and also on Roadkill Garage. But I still have that car and probably will forever. That'll be one of the ones that sticks with me till very near the end. The Roadkill ramp truck. Finnegan loved this thing and bought it and actually became famous for being a ramp truck guy. And he ended up buying a whole bunch of different Ram trucks and ended up also selling them all. He ultimately did a come and swap into the Roadkill ramp truck, virtually restored it, painted it new interior, made it all trick and nice, and then he sold it here, I don't know, perhaps as long as 2 years ago, and I don't know where it is today. The Bonneville Camaro. The one time I failed to set land speed records in this car was the one time that we had it on Roadkill. That car actually belongs to Keith and Tanya Turk. He and her and I always raced it together with me in charge of the engines, them in charge of the car, and they still do own that car and have been running it at Bonneville with different drivers. The Mercury Custom. This was sort of a blip on the radar. We picked this thing up from Alex Gambino's shop and delivered it to the guy who actually owned it. I have no idea what happened to that car after that, but I do remember having fun with Dog on that trip. Ah, the Lemons Fury. This is another one that goes back to the days of Car Junkie TV in 2008-ish. When I got the 73 Plymouth Fury, we turned it into a 24 Hours of Lemons race car, and we built that hood scoop for it that would end up having a very long life. But first, we did a 24 Hours of Lemons, or attempted one, with that car on Roadkill. It's the one thing Finnegan will probably never forgive me for, that he feels like he built that whole car and then I drove it at Lemons and blew it up and he never got to drive it, and that's still like a thorn in his side. And then we cut that thing all apart when I was building the General Mayhem and used some parts out of it, including the 323 limited slip or sure grip rear end. And of course, that hood scoop was cut out of the Fury and installed on the General Mayhem, and the Fury was sent to the scrapyard. But see how in those photos how you can see there's a big number that was cut out of the door? Well, that's buried in my garage right over there. So a hunk of the Fury will live on. And the General Mayhem. Yes, the 1968 Dodge Charger that appeared in more episodes of Roadkill than any other car. I had sold that one to the company when it was Hellcat swapped. I bought it back. I still have the thing. You will see that on my YouTube channel. And I also have a documentary that you will see on my channel about the whole history of that car, so check that out. In the process of building the General Mayhem, I bought this gray tin grill Dodge truck. And I was going to part it out. I was going to pull the 400 big block out of it and the transmission and put it in the General Mayhem. I thought it was way too clean. I sold it to Tony Angelo. He turned it into the Roll Smoky project truck on Hot Rod Garage, and then ultimately sold that thing, and I have no idea where it is today. Also in the General Mayhem episode, obviously, was the big Class A motorhome that we pulled the 440 out of, and our plan had been to hack that thing up and throw it in a dumpster, but that turned into a nightmare, and the thing was disgusting. We ultimately found a scrapyard that was willing to take it, which, word to the wise here, if you actually want a motorhome 440 or a Ford 460 or anything out of a big motorhome, you are going to have a hard time getting a scrapyard to take the thing once you pull the engine out of it. It's a legit problem. And now, the Rotsun, our 240Z that was initially powered by a 4.3 V6 with a turbo, and then later on with a Ford 5.0. I can finally reveal to you that that is owned by Mike Finnegan, and in 2 days from when I'm shooting this, Mike and I are going to go and shoot a YouTube episode road tripping that thing as far as we can in a week from LA, pointed towards his place in Georgia. So yes, the Rotsun is coming back, and it will be the Freiburger and Finnegan comeback episode. Next, the Sinkhole Corvette. Remember that Stingray that we ended up taking to the Corvette Museum, and we wanted to put it in that sinkhole that had fallen in there? Well, when we were done thrashing on that thing, which we did, I believe that it went back to the guy Jamie who we had bought it from, and then I've lost track of it. The Baja Bug from Dirt Every Day. It made a cameo when we went blasting around with a muscle truck in the sand. I've asked Fred Williams, Dave Chappelle, and our head of production, Brett Adkins, and none of us can remember where this one went. Pigpen. I think Pigpen was a 1950, or maybe it was a 51 GMC truck. Another example of a vehicle that Finnegan and I got running out of a junkyard, this time Turner's in Fresno. And once we were done with that, I was kind of mentally done with it, and I told the company to sell it, and it ultimately was sold to our director, Dustin Gould, who is editing this episode for me on YouTube, and he still has that, and they have swapped an S10 chassis under it, which you saw in the Faster with Finnegan show, and installed the LS7 that came out of our van that went into a Dirt Everyday motorhome. That's in the thing also. And so Pigpen lives even to this day, and it's in a couple of episodes of Faster with Cotton and Newbern. I think I said Faster with Finnegan a moment ago, but it is in fact Faster with Cotton and Newbern. The Galaxy Wagon. This is one that we did a fun deal where we had fans come bring cars to a parking lot and make us offers, and we decided on a car to buy. And we bought this really cool Galaxy Wagon, and at the end of the episode, it sat around for a while, then got sold to my then boss, Doug Evans, and then he fiddled with it and sold it again. I don't know where that car is today. The F-Bomb Camaro did appear in Roadkill. I think it was in a compilation episode where we showed it making passes at the very beginning. It might have even been seen on an episode of Hot Rod Unlimited when it went 9.0 at the drag strip. It never went in the 8s when I owned it. That car has been around forever, and everybody always asks me what I'm doing with it, and I always give the lame excuse. It's still sitting at Tom Nelson's, and I've got $1 zillion in parts in it, and we have just not gotten together to put it together, and that is something that really needs to happen on my YouTube channel. I'm not promising it. That's my new statement on F-Bomb. I never promise anything, but eventually it'll probably get together. The vet cart. We had the vet cart even before Roadkill. Finnegan and I did some videos on it as like his very first thing as a staffer on Hot Rod Magazine. And ultimately that got morphed into sort of an off-road buggy thing. And when the whole thing fell apart, Finnegan did buy the vet cart, and so you can see that on Finnegan's YouTube channel. Boat kill, that's the episode where we took the engine out of the muscle truck and put it in the boat and went out on the lake and then came back and took the LS back out of the boat and put it back in the muscle truck and towed it all home. Well, Finnegan eventually gave that boat hull to Joe Cole, who works on the Finnegan's Garage Show on YouTube. The Buick wagon, you know, at the end of the episode with that Buick station wagon, we gave it to a guy, and he ended up taking the wagon and really putting a lot of love into it. He ultimately put a big black Chevy in it. He had it for years, from like his teenage years all the way into his 20s, and he ultimately sold that thing, and it's another one where we just don't know where it is today. General Maintenance is a 2015 Dodge Charger Hellcat that back in the day was dressed up by Diversified Creations to look like my 1968 Charger General Mayhem. The thing was bone stock, and so the company was able to give it to salespeople to drive on Power Tour and stuff like that, so it lived a long life until the very last shooting day ever for Motor Trend was Hot Rod Garage Day, and Lucky Costa was driving it, and it got T-boned by somebody. And it's wrecked pretty badly, but it still does move under its own power. It was sold to our crew guy, Mason, who still has it, and there is some chance that you will see hijinks with the General Maintenance on the David Freibuger Channel. Maybe, eventually. The General Maintenance was a leftover from that episode of Roadkill where we took the brand new Dodges and thrashed them really hard to celebrate our Dodge sponsorship. And there was a couple of other vehicles there. First of all, a red Viper that we took on a motocross track. And there was also a black Hellcat Challenger. Well, because of the damage we did to them in the episode, Motor Trend ended up buying the cars. And they had both of those for a long time in the Detroit office, and I don't know what ultimately happened to them. Ah, the Lowrider, the most hilarious episode of Roadkill ever, in my opinion, when we took that thing, jacked it up on hydraulics, put super swampers on it, and took it into the desert. We had such a riot with that thing. Well, it came home and got sold to one of the guys who was working there at the TV production company, and then he ended up selling it back to the guy who had originally built it. So I would assume that's where it still is with its original builder. The Crop Duster, the 1970 Plymouth Duster that originally showed up on an episode of Roadkill where we threw the General Mayhem's 440 in it after we had pulled that 440 out of General Mayhem to put the Hellcat in it. Well, if you followed Roadkill Garage at all, you know that Steve Dulcich did an immaculate paint job on that thing. We put an interior in it. We put a 440-inch low deck stroker in it. It runs low 12s. It's a great street machine. It's a little bit too nice for me, so I'm scared to drive it, but I do still own the thing, and it's in my garage. This one's just a random Jaguar that we bought for a shootout where we had Randy Popst out there, and it was that car versus the Jaguar, and as soon as production was over, we just sold that thing. I don't know where it went. The Atomic Van. This thing was owned by Hot Rod Magazine editor Rob Canan, and then it was on the Hot Rod Garage Show where we turned it into the MSD Atomic Van, painted it red, put an LS7 in the thing, and Finnegan and I took it on a Power Tour in an episode that became the lost episode of Roadkill that they aired. It was like a bonus one year. And it sat around for a while. I don't know exactly what happened to it, but I think Motor Trend was cleaning the fleet many years ago, not recently, and Lucky Costa bought it, and I believe he took the engine out of it and then sold the van, and no one knows where it is now. Stubby Bob! We'll keep that short. Yes, when Motor Trend was disbanding, I picked up Stubby Bob. There's an episode on my channel that shows you everything about the history of that truck and what's happening with it right now. Basically, it needs everything, and eventually I really hope to do that on the channel. The Maserati, the original little mini pickup that we had that was a factory Mazda rotary pickup, but it had an Olds 455 on a Toronado transaxle in the bed, and it was the whole famous thing of, oh, it should run 10s, it never did. And as most of you are aware, it got stolen out of Blythe, California when we were towing it home from a shoot one time, and everybody asked, has it been found? Has it been found? No one's even looking. So no, that thing has just gone into the vapor. NASCARlo, that is the 70 or 71 Monte Carlo body that we put on a circle track chassis. If you've seen Finnegan's channel, you know that Mike Finnegan bought this one from Motor Trend. Harry Tow, wow man, the bump side crew cab 4x4 tow truck with a 460 and a 4-speed. I love that truck so much. It was just so comfy to drive, and unfortunately it just sat around, and a long time ago, many years ago, Motor Trend sold it for $1,500. I think subsequently it got changed hands a couple of times, and there is a crew cab collection place that you can find on Instagram, I can't remember the name of it, that still has it and loves it to this day, and I think they plan on keeping it around for a while. So you will see Harry Tow around the internet. Another Destroy Cars for No Reason episode, the mullet car shootout with the Mustang and the Camaro, and at the end I drove over them with my Scrambler. Those things went to the scrapyard. My Scrambler itself, I'm surprised to realize I've owned that thing a long time now, 30 years, and I do still have it. The Junkyard Buick, this is that poor car that we dug out of a bunch of weeds and put it on a stretched Corvette chassis, took it to Finnegan's house, tried to make it work. It was junk. It got shipped back to LA, and in shipping, the body actually broke in half and it just went to the scrapyard. The Dirt Track Challenger. This is the car that later became the off-road Challenger when Dulcich and I turned it into an off-road car, like hacking out the wheel wells and making it super cool on Super Swampers, and the thing still lives today. Crew guy Mason has it. You can see it on his Instagram account, Mason's Car Collection, and he drives it around LA all the time. I think it's a keeper for him. Then there's Brohammer, the Cadillac that we built out of a junkyard in Colorado with me, Finnegan, Tony, and Lucky. We put a Cummins diesel in it. We got it from my buddy Andy Moss's yard, and when we were done, it went back to him. He ultimately sold the diesel out of it and then sold the Brohammer separately, and I don't know where the car is today. The little Datsun 520 truck, really kind of a bad custom, but we had fun blasting it around. It sat in the Motor Trend place, and years ago they ended up selling it. It's another one where its whereabouts remain a mystery. Fred's F354. This is a dirt everyday truck that very briefly appeared on an episode of Roadkill. Fred had it sitting around for a long time. I think he ultimately sold the tires off it and then sold the truck separately. It's another one that is just vaporized into who knows where. My 71 Roadrunner. I picked this thing up in the same episode where we got that Datsun 520 truck. It was a 71 383 automatic Roadrunner. It ended up going on Hot Rod Garage. We buffed the thing all out. I can't believe how amazing we made that car look. I sold it to a guy who put a 4-speed in it and made it even better, and he offered it back to me. I probably should have bought it. It was pretty cheap, but I wasn't into it at the time, and it ended up going to Australia. La Fondo was the little Civic that we had in the shootout episode with the red Mazda RX-7. Both of those cars ended up getting sold out of Motor Trend. The RX-7 went to a guy we know in Australia who makes those V12 LS engines, and he still has it, and I don't know where the La Fonda went. The Crusher Impala, the 1969 behemoth that we built for that crossover episode with Mighty Car Mods. We put the blown big block Chevy that had been in the Crusher Camaro into that car. It ended up on a whole bunch of episodes of both Roadkill and Roadkill Garage. I love that thing, and I still own it to this day. You will eventually see it on the channel. Speaking of Mighty Car Mods, people constantly ask me what happened to the Mighty Car Mods Subaru. And I have asked both Marty and Moog, and neither one of them really know. They said it went back to the shop where they worked when they were doing it here in the United States, and they don't know what happened to it afterwards. That's one I think a lot of people would really like to see dug up. So if you've got any clues, make sure to comment and post them. And if it gets found, I will put it up on my social media channels. The Utah Jeep, the one that Rick Payway and I rebuilt the engine on right here in this very garage, and it rod knocked anyway. Well, that thing is parked immediately behind me, sitting outside my garage. It's been sitting around with that bad engine in it ever since. The missing link is the shortened Lincoln that we bought for the 24 Hours of Lemons rally. And at the end of that, we auctioned it off, we sold it to a team. They did end up racing it themselves in 24 Hours of Lemons, and I think they sold it to another guy who ran it at least 1 or 2 events, and I don't know what happened to it from there. Next, we had an episode with a Rotsun where we did a shootout with a Fox body Mustang because we had put a Fox 5-liter in the Rotsun, and that Mustang was just one of those cars that came in and went out. I think the producer sold it. I don't know where it is now, but that paint job is pretty distinctive, so maybe you know where that thing lives. The Disgusting, the 69 Mach 1 that we pulled out of Colorado Auto and Parts, and I ultimately invested a fortune in that car. I made it into my perfect vision of what I thought could be an old car daily driver. Engine, air conditioning, Lucky helped me out on the thing. It had a killer stereo system in it, suspension, you saw it all built up on Roadkill Garage. Once it was finally done, it was just a little bit too much for me in the sense of I didn't want to keep it nice. And after the engine blew up and I had to pull it and build it again and put it back in there, I just turned the corner mentally on the car, and I ended up selling it to a guy who loves the thing. It's in New York. He's on Instagram. The account's called Mud Garage, and so you can see how the Disgusting continues to live today. Finnegan's Brothers Firebird. This is a car that Finnegan bought as one of his dream cars, a 69 Firebird that we used on the One Lap of America episode. When he was done with it, he sold it to his brother, who ended up repainting the thing blue, used it for a while, and then sold it, and whereabouts unknown. The Off-Road Hornet. I dug this thing. Fastback Hornet turned into a Nora off-road race car. We used it for an episode. It went back to Motor Trend, and many years ago when they were having a fleet clearing, they ended up selling that, and I don't know where it is now, but interestingly enough, the guy who originally either built it or who was involved in it approached me at a show somewhere and asked me where it was because they wanted to buy it back. So if you know where our Off-Road Hornet is, perhaps we can do the internet social media thing and connect those guys and put that car sort of back to its rightful owner. The Ugly Truckling. This is one of my worst ideas. We took a crew cab Chevy pickup, cut the entire body off of it, sort of vet cart style, roll caged it, made it rear engined, and drove the thing, I think, from LA to Tucson for the Roadkill Zip Tie Drags, which is now the event that is my duct tape drags. Well, that truck, the Ugly Truckling, was traded off to L&L Classics in Idaho when we picked up the Pontiac T-37, and the Truckling, the last I was at L&L, which was only here, I don't know, 6 months ago, it is still there, so you can go see it. Now the Super Sammy. There was an episode where Dulcich and I went to a junkyard in Arizona, picked a tin top Samurai and hacked it all up to give it motorhome 440 power. It was hilarious. We did another episode where we road tripped the thing. It was absolutely awful. That's another one that got swept out in an earlier Motor Trend fleet sale, and then it got sold to another guy, and now it belongs to some guy with a YouTube channel, and he has brought it out to duct tape drags a couple of times with a different engine in it. And so, Super Sammy lives. He Hate Me, the Econoline pickup truck that Finnegan and I road tripped. It was awful, which is why I didn't feel too bad when we turned the He Hate Me into the Econorado. It was so rusty and awful. We cut it, we shortened up the entire truck, and we put a Cadillac 500 on a transaxle in the bed, kind of like the Maserati, the original Maserati, and we just made that thing worse and worse. It was one of the most terrible things, and it got sold in the Motor Trend clear out years ago, and I don't know where it is now. I guess I should explain that throughout the 13-year run of our show, Motor Trend owned most of these cars, as you can tell from what I'm talking about here, and they cleared out the fleet a few times. Most recently, when the shows were canceled, there was a massive sell-off of like 100+ cars, but they also just sort of trickled them out the door as we went, and usually they were offered to us. Not always. Sometimes they just disappeared. And so that's how some of these vehicles have gone away. When I say years ago it was in one of the sell-offs, that's kind of what happened. The 67 Chevy short bed truck. This was a Hot Rod Garage project that they took from a long bed to a short bed. And then I bought it, and it was in episodes of Roadkill Garage. And then it appeared in the Roadkill Muscle Truck Showdown. And then I think I put a supercharger on it, took it back off. I ended up selling it back to Mikey P, who was the showrunner on Hot Rod Garage, and he still has it to this day. He had the small block in it, and now it has a big block in it, and he's working on an LS swap. So the 67 short bed still exists, and it's still sort of in my realm. Then there's the 67 long bed Chevy truck that I had that was built up with a big block, a 630 horsepower big block on Roadkill Garage. It was in that same Roadkill muscle truck shootout. It was a great truck. And it got sold by me in one of those times where I just had so many vehicles, need to get rid of stuff, and I wasn't using it for anything. And I sold it for 13 grand. And recently, the guy who bought it offered it back to me, and I've sort of flaked on him. I really need to get down there and see the thing because I would like to have it back, but it has been sitting outside and it's deteriorated quite a bit. But I still know where that is, and maybe I'll get it back. It was a cool truck. The Crown Hick, a hot rod garage project done by Tony Angelo and Lucky Costa. Super cool. You know, they put that thing on that Crown Victoria chassis, which is why they called it Crown Hick, which I thought was a great name. It was also in the muscle car shootout. When Motor Trend shut down, Lucky ended up with that truck. Next, the Ford muscle truck. You mostly saw it on Roadkill Garage, but it was also in that Roadkill truck shootout. It was a 460 powered short bed bump side. It was really cool. Dulcich sold that thing, and it went around with a couple of people and ultimately is now owned by a guy who is on Instagram. He goes by Denalon, D-E-N-A-L-O-N, so you can still see the FMT out there in the internet world. Then there's the Mopar muscle truck that is Dulcich's that we did mostly on Roadkill Garage, and Dulcich still has that thing as well, and he's working on it on his YouTube channel. Look up Steve Dulcich Shifted, and you will find that Steve and Wiley Stevens, who was one of our camera guys who also filled in for me on Roadkill Garage occasionally, they're doing a channel now, so check it out. Maybe you'll see the MMT in action. The Death Metal Charger. That is the Charger that was an old dirt circle track car that was really in episodes that were with Finnegan and Tony, not with me. They put a 2JZ Toyota in the thing, and it ended up at Dirtfish with me in the General Mayhem, and it was also in the very last episode of Roadkill. Finnegan still owns that thing. It needs work, but he says it'll come back, so watch for that on Finnegan's Garage. The 67 Chevy Biscayne that we took up to the top of Pikes Peak. What happened there was that we had that Brohammer Cummins-powered Cadillac, and it was at Andy Moss's yard, and I wanted the Biscayne that was in his yard, so we traded him for the Brohammer, and then we got the Biscayne and took it up to the top of Pikes Peak, and then I traded Andy the Biscayne for a 73 Blazer that he had, which I had for a while. It was never on Roadkill. I loved the thing, but ultimately sold that. And then Andy used the Biscayne for a long time. I remember one time he picked me up from the airport in it, and in more recent years he sold it, and so it's another one that is off into La La Land. Thelma and Louise, the big GMB bodies that we threw off a cliff in Alaska. So I think the answer of what happened to them is self-evident. Yeah, they're smashed and gone. This car's called the C-Body Roadrunner, a joke that no one got. They kept on saying, you don't understand, a Roadrunner's a B-body. We know that, but this one was in the shape of a C because it had been wrapped around a telephone pole. No one got hurt. Finnegan and I bought that car and got it running and driving, bent in half, and it was hilarity. Ultimately, I think what happened there is, it went on Roadkill Garage, and Dulcich and I bought another body from Chris Birdsong and did a body swap on it and put the whole drivetrain and mechanical things and front clip and everything on a car that became known as the Wreck Runner that Steve Dulcich still owns. Then the leftover scrap of the C-Body was given to Chris Birdsong, who took it and had it in his backyard forever. It ended up donating some sheet metal pieces from the trunk brace into the General Mayhem. He used it for some other restorations, and I think finally the hulk of that got sent to the scrapyard. Vanishing Paint, my 1970 Challenger that was, I think, the second episode of Roadkill Garage, maybe the third or fourth. It was really up there at the beginning. Dulcich and I put that thing together and did a Roadkill and had a great road trip with it. And I ultimately sold that to Derek from Vice Grip Garage, and you will see some episodes that he did with Dulcich with that car on Roadworthy Rescues, and I think you've seen it a little bit on maybe one Vice Grip Garage episode, and Derek still owns it to this day. Finnegan's Cadillac. He bought that in what turned out to be kind of a flop of a Roadkill episode. We really should have stuck with the car when it wasn't behaving, but instead we sort of shifted gears mid-episode. It was very weird. But Finnegan still has it. He's putting it on a full fabricated chassis, roll caging it and everything. It's tubbed. He wants to make it run somewhere in the 8s, I think, and take it on drag and drive events. But you can see a lot about the Cadillac on the Finnegan's Garage channel at YouTube. The Caddy Gremmy, that is the gremlin powered by a 500-inch Cadillac that I got from a guy at one of our $3,000 Hoopty Challenge episodes. And then we put a new, fresh, good 500 Cadillac in it at Roadkill Garage. Then it was on one of those holiday Hoopty Challenges, and the oil filter got knocked off, and it was still raced, and then it got jumped, and all the motor mounts broke, and Dulcich and I got really disgusted with the thing, and it went to Motor Trend. And when everything disbanded, it was so cheap that I had to buy it, and I do still have it. It'll probably come back on my channel, but it probably won't be Cadillac 500 powered. I'm planning on doing some other things with that gremlin. If I ever get to it, I have to admit, that's a pretty backburnered project. The double truck, when we went back to Colorado Auto and Parts with Leah Pruitt and welded two vehicles together and had fun blasting them around the junkyard. That thing sat around Colorado Auto and Parts for a long time. It might still be there, but if they were smart, they've probably crushed it by now. The Burnout Camaro in Texas, the one with that giant rotted hole under the window and on top of the quarter panel, that was the only vehicle that we ever had impounded. Well, actually, let me correct that. It was the first vehicle that we ever had impounded during a roadkill shoot. The second one was Stubby Bob, but we got it back. And the Camaro we got back also in the middle of the same episode, but it had gone to a tow yard when it did get impounded. And at the end of the show, we gave the car to the impound yard in exchange for the bill that we owed them for the tow and the impound and the recovery. Those guys were super cool. They helped us at like 1 in the morning get it out of the yard so we could keep going. And so they ended up with the car at the end. Oh, I remember why. We left it down in South Padre Island, and those guys actually came and got it, and it was a few 100-mile trip, and so that was kind of why we ended up giving them that car. Huh, good memories. Now there's the Galaxy that we pulled out of Desert Auto Parts in Arizona. It was really cool. It was a 394-speed car, but the engine ended up being junk, and we attempted a parking lot engine swap. That ended up failing. I think the engine that we got went to a guy who I knew from Drag Week, an AMC guy in Arizona, and I think he actually got that thing running. But the car itself ended up maybe going back to the junkyard. You know what? This is one of those cars where I'm going to have to say I actually have no idea what happened to it. I thought I was going to run through this list and off the top of my head I would know about all this, but that's a car I just don't know where it went. Maybe it went back to Desert Valley Auto Parts. I don't know. Huh. One of you knows. Let me know. I'll update everyone. We did an episode that was a low buck car shootout where everybody brought a car, and so there was some new stuff involved. There was a love truck, little brown one that we got that was actually pretty neat. That ended up getting sold to a guy who was sort of inside our circle producing the shows. His name's Pavi. I think he bought that and sold it later. And then we also had a S15 little pickup truck. That one was bought and sold. Then there was a cop car that was acquired from the same guy where we got the cop cars for the season 1 cop car episode. So we basically bought that and sold it back to him cheaper, so it was almost like a rental. And then there was the 4-door Maverick that we picked up. And that Maverick ended up going to the episode of Power Tour where we traded from one car to another. And so it got traded off, and now we go through the list of all of the vehicles that were in that trade episode. What happened to them is kind of self-evident. They got traded off to somebody who has them either now or sold them. First, we traded the Maverick for a J10. Then the J10 turned into Guy Fiero, the off-road looking Fiero. That thing was around for a while and changed hands and has been around on the internet. And it got sold again pretty recently. It's actually pretty cool. I would recommend driving that car if you can actually buy it from somebody because it was a lot of fun. But then that one got traded off and it turned into a 63 Plymouth that had been painted like with a roller or a brush and house paint. It was really pretty terrible. There's a guy, Street Rat Garage, who still has that vehicle, I believe. And then we traded that for a 5-liter Fox Mustang, and at the end of the Power Tour episode ended up just giving that Mustang back to the kid who we had traded it from. You can see that there's a lot of examples where we give cars back, and it's because those cars that were not owned by us hosts, they were Motor Trend property, and they were basically seen as props by the company. And so if it cost us, let's say, $3,000 to get a car from a kid and use it for a week, and then it was cheaper to give it back to him than it was to ship it home and register it or fix it or something, or if we could sell it back for like $500, that happened fairly often, which is, I think, what you're hearing me repeat throughout this video. And next, A car that people have asked me about relentlessly since the show's folded. It is the 1971 Pontiac T-37 that Finnegan and I got out of L&L Classics in Idaho. That's the one that we partially traded for the ugly truckling, and you saw it later on episodes of Roadkill Garage. Well, I will break the news right now that yes, I bought the T-37. So you're going to be seeing that one on my channel. Wait for it. It's going to be great. The Little Red Love Truck. That was an episode that was done with Finnegan and Tony rather than Finnegan and me, and so I never really experienced that truck. It came home after they had put a ton of nitrous through the engine, and it sat in the backyard at Motor Trend for a long time and kind of deteriorated. I bought the thing when Motor Trend closes, basically just to save it, and just like last week sold the thing. And so it's gone off to a new home that I hope loves the thing and puts a V8 in it. The Backyard Buick. It's interesting that it took this long into the history of Roadkill before it ended up in an episode, and it ended up in the 100th episode, which is curious because it was the vehicle that really started it all on YouTube when Finnegan and I did a pre-Roadkill episode rescuing that thing from the back of Rick Payway's yard because his mom had driven the thing since it was just a few years old. Then it got abandoned, we rescued it, and the rest is history. I ended up selling that car to Holly, which gave it away in a contest. Then the contest winner sold it. It went around a few times, and most recently I saw it at my duct tape drags in 2024, and it was owned by a guy who said that he had been inspired to get into cars by the video about that exact car. So it sounds to me like it's with its rightful owner. You can see that thing in my video about the 2024 coverage of the duct tape drags. Another vehicle that was in that 100th episode was the Drat. I think it was a 73 or 4 Dodge Dart. We road tripped that thing to Amarillo, Texas to the drag strip, blew it up there, and donated it to the track. Last I knew, they had an LS swapped into that thing and were running it around. Maybe you'll see it around Amarillo if you're there. Remember the very first episode that aired of Roadkill? Finnegan and I threw a dart at a map and went there and bought a car and road tripped it home. So for the 100th episode, we thought we would do another throwing a dart at a map. So we threw a Dodge Dart at a giant map of the United States that had been chalked onto the desert floor. Yeah, we picked up the dart with a helicopter and let it go, and that thing got smashed bad. So I think the ending for that vehicle is self-evident. And I just throw it in the show because, hey, it is a Roadkill car that appeared on an episode. All right, we are more than halfway through, so stick with it. I'm going to pick up the pace on some of these cars that really aren't that important, like this little Dodge Rampage. We bought it on an episode of Roadkill Garage. It ended up on a silly car shootout episode of Roadkill, and after that it got sold in one of the earlier Motor Trend fleet sweeps, and it went to a kid who unfortunately I think did not realize that the front of the frame of that thing was tweaked just a little bit. And the last time I knew, his mom contacted me and said that he was having trouble getting it running, and did I know anybody who had an electronic module computer to make it run, and I didn't, and that's the last I know about the Rampage. 103 Bubblicious, which is the donk that was originally on the Drift This show, and we ended up off-roading the thing a little bit and drag racing the thing a little bit, and Motor Trend wanted to do a giveaway with it, and I think that ultimately happened, but I don't know who it got given to or where or what they think of that thing. T-Bizzle, interesting. This is the Fox Thunderbird that was originally built on Faster with Finnegan. They put a supercharger on top of the 302. Then it was on a Roadkill episode where Finnegan and I drove it in the snow and took it to Mount Rushmore. On the way home from that, the trailering company that had been hired to bring it back to Los Angeles had a trailer flip over. It completely smashed and destroyed the car. We were able to salvage the blower off of it. I think David Newbern did that, and the rest of it went to the scrapyard. The airport car, a 71 Chrysler Stretch. Call it a limo, it was really an airport car. It was garbage. We bought it from a guy who was really passionate about it, and we ended up doing an episode having some fun with it, and then it went back home and sat forever, and unbeknownst to me and Finnegan, it was sent to a scrapyard. I gotta be honest, I didn't really care that much. I wish I had had the engine out of it, and I did feel bad that it could have been used for something. And the guy we bought it from was really torn up about it, but Motor Trend did scrap that thing sort of without us knowing. Not sort of, completely without us knowing. The 65 D100, that truck was actually really cool. Probably the greatest patina of any vehicle I've ever had, which is saying a lot, but it was neat. That was bought by one of our guys, and you'll see it in episodes of Hot Rod Garage where they put a Gen 3 Hemi in the thing and slammed it down on QA1 suspension, and that guy still has the truck. So that's cool. I'm glad that thing survived. There were some weird episodes during COVID, and one of them was when Dulcich and I did a cheap 4x4 shootout. He bought a Durango, and I got a Suburban, and we did a showdown with him, and at the end, we ended up selling off the Durango, and the Suburban got gifted to Dulcich, and he still has it up at the farm. Rubber Duck, Mike Finnegan's Firebird that is tubbed. I think that's one of the greatest vehicle names that we've had because of Big Rubber and Firebird, which is kind of duck, and it's yellow, like a rubber ducky. He still owns that, and I don't think that it's ever gone in the 8s, and that is his goal with a blown big block in that thing. So look for that on Finnegan's Garage. There was an episode where we took a couple of cars to a rally school in Texas. One of them was the Rally Camaro that had been on Faster with Finnegan, and the other one was a Rally Duster that you saw on Roadkill, mostly. It may have been in a Roadkill garage. The Camaro ended up going to New Bern, and the Duster ended up getting traded off to Chris Birdsong. The engine out of the Duster wound up in my red Duster from Roadkill Garage. Birdsong got the blue Rally Duster. He played with it for a while and then sold the thing just recently to a guy who I hope continues to thrash it. You'll see it in the autocross events out at the Muscle Cars at the Strip event, I believe. Then there was the Toyota truck with the small block Chevy in it, the one that burned like a zillion quarts of oil in an episode of Roadkill. That actually belonged to David Newbern at the time, so at the end, that went back to Newbern, and I asked him about it a couple months ago, and he had sold it to somebody, and so there's another one that is off away from the Roadkill inner circle. The Super Camaro, that crazy second gen with the giant fender flares and the tilt front end. Yep, it's time to break the news. I bought that one for Motor Trend and paid real money for it, and so I hope I can make it cool again, man. I dreaded working on that car because the tilt front end is such a disaster with the hydraulics and it's so heavy and stuff, but it's such a time capsule cool thing, I had to have it. So that's one that one way or another you'll eventually see on the David Freibuger channel. Hemi Gremmy, here's the one car on my list that I believe that I've put in 2 places on the list. I talked about it earlier when it was bone stock and it was in the episode where we ran over the Prius with a tank. Well, later on, we did fulfill my vision of making a street freak out of this thing, put it on a heavily modified Model A chassis, made it sit way up in the sky like a crazy street freak from the 70s, and put a Hemi in it with a tunnel ram. And then later on, of course, Finnegan stole the thing without me knowing it, took the Hemi out of it, rebuilt it, actually put a different Hemi in it that's 535 cubic inches that was in Blasphemy. It made 700 horsepower. He surprised me with it at Roadkill Nights, gave me the car back. I will tell you that I was on the brink of probably pulling the engine out of Hemi Gremmy and getting rid of it, but after Finnegan pulled the ultimate bro move, like giving me a 700 horsepower Hemi and doing that swap and all the people involved with it, that has got to be at least a long-term keeper. Probably not forever, but I still do have the Hemi Gremmy. It's in storage, and it's another one, as I keep saying, that someday will show up here on the channel. A lot of the reason why I bought all these cars is to have variety of stuff here on the David Freibuger channel, and I haven't yet gotten completely up to speed where I have a place to work on them. I'm still just working out of my garage, and so these are back-burnered, but I have schemes for all of these cars to make great videos right here, so hang in for it. The Thrash Metropolitan. This was a little Nash Metro that was stretched out in the nose and loaded with a 2.3 turbo engine out of a Thunderbird coupe, turbo coupe. And this is a really sad one because Motor Trend tried to sell that car and it was pretty poorly put together and kind of dangerous and pretty claptrap, and they couldn't find anybody who would buy it or even take the engine out of it. And I'm afraid that the Thrash Metropolitan went to the scrapyard. I feel bad about that one. Next up are a whole bunch of cars that were involved in a scene at Roadkill Nights where we decided to trade down. We bought a really nice 72 Duster and we kept trading it for worse and worse and worse vehicles. So first, there was the 72 Duster. Then we traded that for a 64 Dodge, and then that for a 67 Coronet. And then we traded the Coronet to a kid for a 4-door Maverick. And at the end of the episode, surprised him by letting him keep both the Coronet and the Maverick. Now, the great thing is that the kid sold the Maverick off and has invested himself into the Coronet, and he has done it full-on low-buck, regular guy style. He put a 440 in it, he put a 4-speed in the thing, he got it running and driving, he actually brought it out to the duct tape drags in 2024, and so you can see it in that video. I'm so stoked that that car, like, inspired a guy to live this gearhead life. Then there was the Pro Street Dodge Mirada that I called Pepto-Dismal, which was pretty funny. It became Cotton's candy. Mike Cotton, I'm speaking of. After we finished our episode with that beater Pro Street car, Cotton got it and loved it and buffed it up and made it great, and you saw it on episodes of Faster with Newbern and Cotton, where they put a blown big block in the thing, buffed it all out, put the correct 80s billet wheels on it. I saw the thing out at an event here in California, and I will say Cotton did that thing right. It is such a flashback to the DuQuoin Street Machine Nationals back in the day. Finnegan's off-road truck. He bought this Pro 2 off-road truck. It was in one episode. We blasted the thing around, and he ended up, I think, essentially giving it to his buddy Andy Rawls, who still has it, and who I'm actually going to see next week as Finnegan and I get together to shoot a YouTube episode. In the episode where Finnegan and I went and ran Sick Week, we bought a 3rd Gen Trans Am and used it throughout the week, and you saw the ultimate disposition of that vehicle at the end of the episode. We ended up giving it to a young girl who had run Sick Week with her dad, and the last I knew, they were actually painting that thing and making it great again. Another Finnegan dream car appeared in 2 episodes where we built the thing, and I was sick for one of those episodes. David Newbern came in and sat in for me. It was that mid-year Corvette, and it had an LS in it, and we ended up putting a transmission in it, getting it going. Man, they did the greatest burnouts with that thing, and almost as soon as the episodes were over, he sold that thing because I think he wanted to get a different Corvette to turn into a drag car rather than hack up the one that was actually pretty good. The El Darto is a vehicle that I picked up in an episode of Roadkill Garage. I found a guy in a desert who had this 440 swapped 68 Dart that reminded me so much of my Cheap Thrills Dart from back in the day. I had to have it. We had it in an episode of Roadkill Garage where we painted up the engine compartment, made the engine look really great. And then Finnegan and I did a road trip where one of the stops that we made that I remember really well is the last one at Memphis Drag Strip after it had closed. And I have so much history at Memphis, I was sort of emotional about that. I ended up selling that thing to Derek at Vice Grip Garage. You'll see it in the background of some of his videos, but I don't think he's done anything big with it yet. The limo truck, or stretchy truck, a 6-door square body dually that Finnegan bought from the guys at Hot Rod Ranch. It was in one episode. Finnegan wanted to do more. It's still sitting around out here in California somewhere. He still has a great scheme for it, so look for that one on Finnegan's Garage. In the same episode with the limo truck was my 56 Chevy known as the Field Car that was really built on Roadkill Garage. That's a 56 Chevy complete beater that now has a 408 or maybe a 406 small block in the thing, and it is a blast with a 6-speed and everything. I still own that car. I'm not exactly sure what to do with it, but definitely before it goes away, you'll end up seeing it on my channel. Mason's F-250 4x4. Mason was a PA who worked on the show, and he had bought this truck that Dulcich and I loved, and it was pretty, like, it had a horrible engine in it. We did an episode road tripping at home. Mason still owns that truck. He's got a 460 swapped into the thing. You can see that again on the Instagram of Mason's Car Collection. My 39 Ford sedan, it scratched and itched. I wanted a 39 so badly, and it was great. It was such a cool beater, and it had a Y block in it. I got it from the guys at Iron Trap Garage, but I sold it before we even finished shooting the episode, and it's now in Arizona. It belongs to the father of the guy who owns the FMT. Remember when we got busted by the Secret Service? That was in a '69 Mustang Coupe back in Washington, D.C. And that's another story of we bought the car, got it running and driving, did a little bit of a loop with it, and sold it back to the guy for like pennies on the dollar when we were done with the episode. Finnegan 67 C10. There is a crazy amount of technology in this truck, and we had fun blasting it through Death Valley with no doors on it and everything. And that truck ended up appearing in the very last episode of Roadkill, and it was crazy because he was taking it down the drag strip and it threw a drive shaft. The drive shaft cut a fuel line, and this thing went up in flames bad. So the very end of Roadkill is destroying one of Finnegan's most complicated and loved project vehicles. He's going to fix that thing up, and you'll see that on Finnegan's Garage on YouTube. The Eldorongo, what a debacle this thing was. We bought this Cadillac Eldorado, which is obviously front-wheel drive, and so before we got it, a guy had cut the back of it off and turned it into a flatbed trailer. And then the car broke in half, and so we finished cutting the broken part off and then scabbed on sort of a frame section in the back with some big off-road tires. It looked killer, but then we blew the engine up on the thing. And it was such garbage. That's one that got scrapped, and I actually don't feel that bad about it. Then there was Finnegan's Daytona. It's a clone. It's the world's worst Daytona. It was on an episode of Roadkill, and Finnegan immediately did something on it on his YouTube channel, and it actually went through the moon. He still has that thing. He likes it. I think he wants to make it better. Watch for that one on Finnegan's Garage. We are down to the final 10, so hang with me here. The next one to appear on Roadkill was the Bang Shift Cougar, which actually was from the very first episode of Roadkill Garage. It was mine then. I traded it off to Steve Dulcich in this convoluted scheme that ended up with my car getting painted and giving him an engine and a bunch of stuff. You saw it on a bunch of episodes of Roadkill Garage. The Bang Shift Cougar is still in Dulcich's possession. It's one that I don't think is at the very top of his keep list, so it might be for sale someday. Either that or it'll just sit up there on the farm for a while. The dirt cars from North Carolina. This was an episode of Roadkill where we just bought these things, blasted them around for a while, and then I think they stayed there with Biggins Customs. My '69 Plymouth Belvedere. I got this thing from Performance Auto in Wyoming. The family there was super cool, helped us out get this thing. We dropped in a Hemi and a 4-speed and a Dana 60. And it never really got refined on Roadkill. That's a car I still have and love. I haven't seen it since the end of that episode because it's in another storage garage somewhere, but it's one that is probably near the top of the list for revival on my channel. I say revival, and it's funny because, you know, so many people are doing these things where cars are abandoned for a zillion years and you revive them and bring them back. Well, I'm now at the point where I can do that with my own cars. I have so many of them and I ignore so many of them for so long that it's like a revival every single time. But the '69 Hemi Belvedere will come back. Now the F-Rod, my 1931 Ford Model A drag car that was built entirely on Roadkill Garage, and it appeared just at the end of one episode of Roadkill where I did a shootout against Mike Finnegan in his Blasphemy. The reason for that, these are both cars that are capable of 850 in the quarter mile. His 55 Chevy supercharged Hemi with a stick. Mine, Model A, naturally aspirated 572, no electronics on it with an automatic. Mine's gone 8.501 and 155 miles an hour. His is currently running 860s and 160 miles an hour, so it's a pretty good race, but we didn't nail a good race in that episode. So maybe someday you will see that on one of our channels, but for now, my guy Sam, who built the whole chassis on that car, has been running the thing. In fact, he's gonna have it down in SoCal pretty soon. Maybe I'll have a chance to tag along and come drive the thing so that you can see the F-Rod right here on my own channel. Next, the boat car, just a gag. I don't remember what kind of car they dropped that fiberglass boat over, but we blasted the thing around in the winter and drove it to Indy and ultimately sold the thing back for pennies on the dollar to the guy who we got it from. Then, the Maserati 2.0. So many people asked about our original Maserati that we hadn't built, that got stolen, that we always felt obligated to build another one and actually run 10s. Well, in predictable Roadkill fashion, even as it came down to the very last days of the show, we did that. We threw 2 episodes at it. We completely failed. It has a front-wheel drive transaxle and 5.3-liter LS style V8 in the thing that we put in the back of the chassis. It never performed. It never did the right thing. It was a complete flop. And when Motor Trend folded, no one wanted it. No one would buy it. Not even Finnegan, who was super passionate about it for the show. And it's now owned by Mason. So maybe you'll see the thing creep up, although I have to admit, I don't love the thing. I'm not really dying to mess with it again. The 4th to last episode of Roadkill was me and Dave Chappelle. Finnegan had broken his leg, and so Chevelle hopped in, and we bought this terrible Turbo Trans Am. I mean, the thing was horrible. I tried to show in the episode just how terrible it was. It might not have come off. At the end of the episode, I think they sold that thing for $1,500 to somebody. My 1956 Ford F100. This is an example of something that was really aspirational for me. I wanted a 50s truck. I wanted to emulate the little Hot Wheels car. I wanted to be like Pat Ganal, who drove a 56 F100 forever. So we bought this thing, and right now I have to admit it is more than I want to handle for my channel. It needs, I don't know, it needs hot rodding. To me, it needs another chassis. It needs to be slammed. I don't think I'm going to get to it. So the 56 F100 is for sale. It is running, driving, Y-block, ready to go, needs a radiator really badly. I need $7,500 for it. If you're interested, email me. It's HeyFreiburger@gmail.com. Another episode at the very end of our run that I did with Dave Chappelle is the one with the 4x4 Pacer that he and Fred Williams had built on an episode of Dirt Every Day. We surprised Dave by bringing the thing out to a junkyard and having him stumble across it and then gifting it to him. And so that car was given to Chappelle, and he still has it up at his place in Spokane. The very last vehicle that was new to us for an episode of Roadkill was this generic short bed Dodge truck that we bought that was a complete rusty disaster, and we took it to Roadkill nights and we hacked the whole body off of it, and we did this thing where we tried to make it faster on the drag strip, and ultimately it ended up as a bare running driving frame that I think we sold to a kid in the crowd for $200. There was another episode of Roadkill that we shot after that one, but emotionally, that was the last episode for me. Because Finnegan and I engaged with so many fans and had so much fun. We were able to cut parts off of the truck and sign them and give them away to people. And at the end of the day, we had so many tools left over that we stood there and signed those and gave them away to people. And it was at Roadkill Nights, which is a party to begin with. It was just a good time. And again, to me, emotionally, the end of Roadkill. We did one more episode that was sort of a project car shootout. You can see it streaming even now. It's the one where Finnegan's truck caught on fire really horrifically, so that's memorable. But that Dodge truck was the very last car that had not appeared on Roadkill prior to its appearance on that episode. And that's a wrap on all of the cars that appeared on Roadkill. I like thinking that they are still out there. I kind of like that there's a bunch that I don't know where they went. I really want you to tell me if you know where some of these cars are. Post, or even better, email me photos. HeyFreiburger@gmail.com. Let me know, and I will share them on social media to sort of let the Roadkill fleet continue to live into eternity. And of course, there's a lot of cars that are still owned by us hosts. It was very cool that the guys at Motor Trend were willing to sell them off to us at pretty cheap prices so that we could keep sort of the vibe alive. You'll see them on my channel, you'll see them on Finnegan's channel, you'll see them on Dulcich's. I think Newbern has some, of course Cotton has that one. And so stay tuned, because Roadkill may be over, but the guys who did it were doing all of this stuff before the TV show started, and we're gonna keep doing it after it's over, and you'll see it all right here on YouTube. So watch for it, and come back for more of those cars that you love so much on the David Freibuger Channel.